Welcome, ghouls and boys, to Tales from the Creek. I'm Jenny, and I'll be your guide for this misadventure. I'm going to read you some really spooky bedtime stories, and the best part, they are all true. From haunted houses to UFO sightings, or even encounters with regular humans with bad intentions, we will get into all of it. Tonight, I'm going to tell you stories about a protective ghost, a new friend with a hidden dark side, a road trip to remember, and a job in a town whose past has never been forgotten. So, find a nice, dark, cozy spot, maybe put on some headphones, close your eyes, and imagine that these stories were yours. This story takes place in early summer of 1977 in La Villa, which is located in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. My husband Hugo and I had moved into the Cooper home after a fire at the home where we were living. We now had an 18-month-old daughter, Nisa. Nisa was the first of the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, and we lived close to all of my in-laws near a rancho just west of La Villa. Our baby's great-grandfather had just passed about 15 months before, and he adored her. The nights were hot down in the valley, and we would sleep with the windows open, but my husband Hugo was often out on gigs on the weekends, so I kept them closed on those nights so I could sleep a little more securely. The first night that I had this experience, I thought that I had dreamed it because it was too strange to have been real. Nisa was asleep in her bed, which was across from the foot of our bed. I woke up between midnight and 1 a.m. and rolled onto my back and opened my eyes, and I saw a man. He was at least 6 feet tall, slim. He was wearing a suit and what looked like a trench coat. I couldn't see his features, but while he was standing there at the end of my bed, I didn't feel like he was a stranger, which didn't make sense to me. I felt him looking at me, and I thought he might be smiling as he walked past the bed on the right side toward my closet. His presence didn't scare me, and I got a feeling like he was gentle. I woke up a little more and jumped up to run to my baby. I turned on the lights, looked for him in the closet and the rest of the house, and I found nobody there. I grabbed my daughter, went to the living room, and waited up for Hugo to get back from his gig. The next morning, after I got some sleep, I convinced myself that it must have just been a dream. 2 weeks later, another Saturday night when my husband was at a gig, I woke up again around the same time between 12 and 1 a.m. This time I rolled over and I saw the man standing at the foot of my bed, but he was watching my daughter. I still didn't have a threatening feeling from him, but it did make me uncomfortable this time because he was watching my baby. Again, he didn't smile, but he still seemed pleasant. He walked away, and this time he just simply disappeared. I picked my daughter up and put her in the bed with me, but I stayed on the side closest to where he was walking toward the closet. I got a strange feeling about that closet. The next morning, I can't remember if I mentioned it to my husband, but it started to feel like these were definitely not dreams. Finally, everything came to a head 2 weeks later. We went to bed again that Saturday night, and I began feeling nervous. I'd been thinking more about it and how this was only happening every other Saturday when my husband was away at a gig. I worked full time and was tired, and I tried to stay awake waiting for Hugo, but I fell asleep. I woke up again at the same time, but this time the man was at the side of the foot of my bed, and when I looked at him, he looked back at me and then in my daughter's direction. I continued to look at him harder to see if I could make out any features, but this time his face has a look of concern. He lifted his arm, and a long finger was pointed toward my daughter. I turned to look at her as he began to walk away, and I can still see him from the side of my eye. I looked at her where it's mostly dark, except for the moonlight filtering through the sheer curtains. Suddenly, the room was ice cold. I couldn't move, and I felt like I could only breathe in tiny, shallow breaths. I started to pray the Our Father, and I saw a neon green cloud hovering over my daughter that looked toxic and it had a terrible smell. I can't even describe the smell exactly, but it was just not right. The cloud moved down closer to her, and then without touching her, it lifted up and dissipated. Suddenly I could breathe and move again. I grabbed my daughter, I took her to the living room, and I prayed the Our Father and every other prayer and Bible verse that I could remember. The next morning, my daughter was very sick. She had a horrible fever. I told Hugo and my mother-in-law the next day, and they spoke to our priest. He said that they didn't believe in exorcisms or anything like that, but that they would bless the home. He believed that it was the spirit of a family member coming to protect my daughter. My husband's family believed that this was her great-grandfather and that he was here to let us know that she was sick. Another elder family member believed that this was caused by ojo, or envy. I never saw the man again, but I will always be grateful that he was there to warn us. I'm a 27-year-old female, graduated high school about 10 years ago. In my freshman year of high school, I was pretty well known and had a lot of friends. I was very friendly, and every time I saw someone alone, I'd greet them and offer them my friendship. Sometime during the year in my math class, we had a new guy. We can call him Jose. Jose had recently moved to the US from Mexico, and he hardly knew any English. Me being Hispanic, I was able to speak to him in Spanish and made him feel welcomed. Jose had no friends and always sat by himself. In that math class, I started helping Jose out a lot. He sat behind me and he would always play with my hair. Not actually my head, but my hair, so I could hardly even feel it. I sort of felt like he had a crush on me, and he was not bad looking, so I didn't look at it as a big deal. For a few months, maybe 2 or 3, he played with my hair. It became a norm. He said he really liked my hair. Towards the end of these months, he said he wanted to play a game and asked me to write the things that I loved most in life. He would do the same, and then we would both share our papers. Of course, I wrote down my family, God, friends, and a whole bunch of other things. When I gave him back the list, he wanted specific names and said he would do the same. I ended up writing my friends and family's names on it. One day we were just hanging out in class, and Jose said, "Can I show you something? But you can't tell anyone, or else you're going to have to pay for it." I was so confused. I thought maybe he would ask me out. Jose pulled out a Ziploc bag, and I couldn't really tell what was in the bag. It wasn't until he placed it on the table that I noticed it was a Ziploc bag full of hair. My hair, he said. Jose pulled up his sleeves and showed me his arm. He had about 10 healed scars that he had made with the blade of a knife that went down his arm. There was a fresh knife wound, and he grabbed one of my hairs, placed it on top of the freshly opened wound from the night before, and said, "You're mine now. I know who you love, what you love. If you don't do as I say, you'll pay for everything. These are all the scars, and these are all the souls that I own. Anything and everything that happens from now on, think of me." My heart sank. He started smirking. I ran out of the class crying and ran to the office. Everyone was so confused. I asked to speak to my counselor immediately, where I explained what had happened. Jose was pulled out of class, taken to the principal's office, and was expelled that day. I feared for my life. They found all these notes of other people in his backpack, and mine was there. They saw the scars and found my hair. I never heard from him again. I've had some pretty fucked up shit happen in my life after that, and I always thought of Jose. I haven't talked about this in years. I'm afraid that if I mention this, he'll hear me and more bad's to follow. I got so close with God, closer than ever. Until this day, I don't know if Jose was just messing with me, but I will tell you that after that encounter, I am no longer the super friendly, open-hearted person that I used to be. My story takes place in South Texas on Route 77. Only that's not where it really begins. The women in my family have always had experiences. From a very young age, we were more prone to seeing, feeling, and hearing things that are difficult, if not impossible, to explain. I'm not sure what makes us this way, whether it's a cultural thing in general or just having elders who acknowledge that they too believe that we're not always alone on this earth, all while simultaneously grabbing a rosary and warning us to not let anything bad in. Or maybe it's just a genetic disposition. Regardless, we come from a long line of strong women who seem to almost always attract otherworldly energy. We walk the fine line that many Hispanic families do. We went to church pretty much every Sunday growing up and weren't supposed to have interest in evil things like movies or books about demons, but when we all got together, we shared our stories of the latest experience, or even one from one of our aunts or grandma's childhoods, and our grandmothers and mothers were not above doing a good limpia on you if they thought you might have ojo. Maybe later on I'll get a chance to share some of their stories with you, as they're among some of the most fascinating and terrifying that I've ever heard. Now, maybe that's because I still had to sleep in the houses where these things happened, but for now, I want to share my story, or at least one that belongs to my eldest sister and I. My immediate family included both of my parents, my three sisters, and me. I am the third born out of four, and despite us all having very different personalities, I've always been kind of a chameleon, and I don't just get along with pretty much anyone, but I also always find a way to enjoy my time with them. This time, I would have a 6-hour drive with sister number one, which was Nisa. It was 1999, and my parents had purchased a used Honda Civic for sister number two, which is Lonnie. We needed to make the drive following my parents down to the Rio Grande Valley where she was living and going to school at UT Pan American. So Nisa, who was 23 at the time, would drive the Honda with 16-year-old me as her passenger, and we would caravan down with my parents and little sister Karina, age 11, in a separate vehicle. We always took our trips down to the valley late at night, partly due to my dad's late work hours, partly due to wanting to avoid traffic, but mostly due to a few of us, myself included, always being late. Again, the drive is 6 hours long, but we're a family that always enjoys road trips together. They're filled with singing, laughing, stops at Whataburger, and the inevitable sleep once the sugar/caffeine buzz wears off. This time, though, I was going to be the co-pilot, which was a luxury not often afforded to the third child. There was always someone else who called shotgun or pulled the age card to get that coveted front passenger seat. We followed our parents from our house to a gas station before we got on the road, and we stocked up on sodas, chips, candy. I still remember that Nisa got the big, giant, chewy sweet tarts, and I got a pack of Now and Laters. We set off on the road where it was already nighttime, but since we lived in a suburb out of Houston, the first hour or so of the drive was pretty well lit by streetlights on the freeways. The further south that you get, the less populated the drive becomes. For most of my life, I could tell you exactly how to get down to the valley, but not with any useful directions like the names of highways or how many miles between each small town, just by looks and feel and small markers. There was one gas station that we stopped at for my dad's favorite tacos, another gas station that had clean bathrooms, great burritos, and hot dogs, and our halfway point in Refugio where we made our stop at Whataburger every time. So a lot of these markers revolved around food. Anyway, we had already passed our halfway mark and stopped following our parents as closely. Again, we knew the way, so we didn't need to follow for directions, but maybe we should have followed closer for safety. We were on a pitch black road and had just gotten into an area where there are signs warning to be careful, as it is an area where many people cross after crossing the border. For a lot of that drive, there are fields on the sides of the road. It has always made me nervous that it is so dark out there, and I know that you would not be able to see a person until you came right upon them. At this point of the drive, we still had some candy left, but had slowed down on the consumption. We had started talking about a radio show that our dad told us about called Coast to Coast AM, which at the time was hosted by Art Bell. It aired late at night and was full of stories of alien encounters, conspiracy theories about the government, paranormal experiences, and it was right up our spooky-loving alley. We decided to tune in and get spooked. As we turned the radio on, Art Bell was talking to someone who was calling from a payphone and was in an absolute state of panic. He was talking through tears and could barely catch his breath. He was telling the host and everyone tuning in that the government was doing experimental tests on his community. He went into detail about shots that they were given and side effects that they were developing and how they were after him for telling the public the truth. He talked about aliens, Area 51, and we were silent as we listened, intrigued, and honestly freaked out. We were the only ones on this pitch black road where you could only see as far as your headlights could shine. Our parents were nowhere in sight. Suddenly, out of nowhere, there was a sonic boom that coincided with what felt like a semi T-boning us and shoving us off the road into the shoulder and ditch area. At the same time, the radio went dead. We screamed as it happened. Like I said, it just felt like we had been hit by another vehicle, but from the left side of the car. It made no sense. We were on this small road, which was only 2 lanes each direction with a large medium and an occasional crossover. There were no vehicles to our left, not even in the lanes going in the opposite direction. As we settled and tried to catch our breath and figure out what had just happened, we looked around and everything was still dark. There was nobody else there. My sister told me to stay in the car and she was going to go out to survey what we assumed was massive damage, judging by the force of impact and the sound that it had made. She got out of the car and there was nothing there. Not a scratch, not a dent, not any evidence of what could have done this. She walked all the way around the car and found nothing. She got back in the car and we were so confused. We looked around and we suddenly realized that I had thrown my entire pack of now and laters and they were all over the car. We erupted in this laughing fit, one of those that only happens after you've been completely terrified, but now you were just relieved. We got back on the road, turned the radio back on, and we heard Art Bell explaining that he wasn't sure what happened, but they were now back on the air. Our incident had coincided with the station inexplicably going off the air. How could we explain that? We couldn't then, and we can't now, 21 years later, and probably never will. I sometimes wonder if it could have been someone running across the road, maybe they ran into the side of us, but surely they would be badly injured considering our speed. Could it have been a deer? That would have left damage and evidence of damage done to them. I suppose some things can never be explained, especially in South Texas. The summer when I was 18, I traveled the countryside with my cousin Albino. We sold furniture in vacant lots in small towns all over North Texas. My job with 2 other people was called advance crew. My usual task was to drive a 45-foot bobtail truck with a Winnebago attached behind it. We slept in the Winnebago while we stayed in the town selling furniture. Albino normally drove in later, driving a second vehicle, a large semi-truck. The other people in the advance crew were a married couple named Bobby and Jean. Our next stop was going to be Walsenburg, Colorado. So I, Bobby, and Jean went ahead to find a vacant lot, preferably close to downtown. Walsenburg is an old town. It used to be called Plaza de los Leones when Colorado was part of New Spain. We arrived around 2 p.m., so we started the paperwork to negotiate for a lot, register at City Hall, get a permit, all of that. Once we got to the vacant lot, Bobby, Jean, and I took the furniture from the bobtail and arranged some of the parking lot. Then we covered it all with plastic tarp to protect the furniture from the evening dew. Bobby, Jean, and I eventually settled in the Winnebago for dinner. We talked about many things to help pass the time. Around 9 p.m., after dinner and a beer from the small dining table, I turned and looked out the back window from the Winnebago. I find it hard to describe the feeling, but I saw and felt a presence moving down the street towards us. I found myself pointing at the presence and asking Bobby and Jean if they could feel it too. Jean was put off by my question, but they went back to talking. As the presence came towards us, I still followed its path with my finger, which started to really scare Jean. By the time it entered the Winnebago from the back, Jean was really freaking out while Bobby was telling me to stop. Still following it with my finger, I was stunned to see it actually passing right through the dining table and out the front of the Winnebago. I calmly continued pointing out the presence as it kept going and it eventually turned down one of the streets. Nobody slept well that night because of what happened. It shook us up having a real supernatural experience and not some sort of scary storytelling session. Albino drove in the next day. During the next 2 weeks while we were in Walsenburg, I talked with some of the old timers of the town. They shared that the path that I described follows one of the mines that runs under the city. Many miners died in those mines over the years, so that's why there were so many souls wandering through the city. After the summer was over, I went back home to Houston and entered community college. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I look forward to meeting you here every Saturday at 9 p.m. Central Time for a new episode and new frights. If you want to share your story with me, please send your submissions to tftsub@gmail.com. That's tftsub@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new tales to tell, and I'm happy to credit you or keep you anonymous. Massive, massive thanks to the amazing band Such Marvelous Monsters for creating my theme music. Please do yourself a favor and check out even more of their music. The links are in the description for the video. Also, big thanks to all of this week's contributors and the contributors who have shared with me for my future episodes. I'll see you all next week.